よし、来た。というわけで、コーセラの勉強を始めます。というか、ガイド付きプロジェクトっていうやつでやります。プロジェクトは、Your idea with Visual Studio Idea. This is a project-based course. 1.5 時間で終わります。High Fidelity Prototyping. Using Hinga to create high fidelity prototypes. Collaboration with Figma. This is index AD material. With Visual Studio Code, this is a hands line. Graded to this final assignment that you interest. これやっていいのかな。まあ、this course runs Coursera hands-on platform called Lime. On Lime, you don't produce the hands-on manner in your browser. You will get instant access. というわけで、やってみると、You don't produce the code. So you set up auto-step mini-app and color theme. 絶対ボイラープレート on the Leave server for HTML. After tasks assessment. JavaScript AngularJS. Version management. Script practice. OK。ガイド付きプロジェクトのラインを発生。まあ、せっかくだからこれは、よいしょ。これを、こうでいいかな。もう繋がって、繋がった。よし、OK。
Hello and welcome to this guided project about configuring your IDE or integrated development environment. Hello and welcome to this guided project about setting up your IDE with Visual Studio Code. Now, IDE is integrated development environment. So this project was designed with beginners in mind. So you do not need to have extensive development knowledge to follow along, although it will help. We will set up an development environment for various programming languages. However, you can apply the same principle to set up for other languages. We will only focus on configuring Visual Studio Code and not the particulars about writing code. My name is Harrison Kong. I'm going to be your instructor for this project. Now, on your side of the desktop is where you can follow along as we go through this project. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about just get you familiar with different parts of the Visual Studio Code screen setup. So let's talk about this bar on the left side here. So you can see there's an Explorer option, and there's a search, there's a source control, there's also run and debug. There's also extensions, and there are a couple of other items down here. So this is the activity bar. That's what Microsoft is calling it. By the way, Microsoft is the owner of Visual Studio Code, although it is under an MIT license, so you usually don't need to do much to use it. Now, let's go ahead and open the Explorer bar. You see that it opens up another area here. This is called the sidebar. So, and you can resize it to give you more room on the other side where you will be editing files. It is not particularly exciting right now, so let's open up a folder by saying Open Folder. I have prepared a set of files that you can kind of play with. Again, this project is not about writing code, so go ahead and double-click Website on your desktop, and then just hit Select Folder. And it shouldn't take more than a couple seconds, but sometimes it does. All right, this project is not about writing code, so go ahead and double-click Website on your desktop, and then just hit Select Folder. And it shouldn't take more than a couple seconds, but sometimes it does. All right, so you will see this warning when it's the first time you open up a folder. That you trust the author of this file, because some people can write some bad code and harm your computer. But in this case, of course, you can trust this code, because also this environment has nothing to do with your local workstations. Cannot access anything on your computer. So you can just click the checkbox and then just say yes. All right, now you can see that this is why it's called Explorer, because it is kind of like a file explorer. You see all the tree and the directory structure of that folder that you just opened. Click on index.html. You will see the code. Now, again, you can resize this to make this smaller. So you see the code has color coding in it. Now, not all languages know how. Visual Studio Code doesn't know how to color code all the languages, but the basic is covered. So HTML, JavaScript usually do pretty well, and all the others, we're going to learn what you can do to add those functions. So anyway, these are where your editors are. So if you open another file, let's expand the CSS subfolder and double-click master.css. Now, it will replace the one that you open. Sometimes it's pretty stubborn. You have to click it a couple times if you want both of them to open. These are your editor groups on this side. And then down below, there's a blue bar. There's a status bar, so you can see that it changes, depends on what's open. Right here is giving you information about where your cursor is, and also the spaces for indentation, encoding, things like that, and also language mode. This is kind of interesting if you want to change how Visual Studio Code deal with whatever file you are editing. Now, Visual Studio Code, it's just an editor that has very few functions about developing software. Actually, it's a fancy text editor, but it does allow people to customize it to most of the ways that they like to do development. So it is actually quite flexible, and it's becoming extremely popular. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the built-in settings. How do you customize this just for the built-in settings in Visual Studio Code? Now, if you're using Windows, it's under the File menu. There is a Preference. If you're using Mac OS, there is another menu to the left of File, and that's where it is. But we're using Windows, so it's Preferences and then Settings. You can also hit the Control, shortcut key. All right, so here's all the settings that they said commonly used. Not all of them, basically, just the one that are commonly used. Now you can explore these, or you can search for it. So let's just explore this one. So these are pretty basic, the text editor. So we are going to scroll up here and change. If I can find it, there you go, font size. This is where you change the font size in your editor. So let's change it to 16 because our screen is kind of small.
まあ、あんま
right?
小さくしても
Now,
仕方ない
once
人
you've
と
done
か、
that, you would notice there's a blue bar on the left side of this setting. That means it has been changed by the default setting. That's how you can tell. And you can reset it to factory setting by pressing this little gear here and then press reset setting. But or you can just change it back to where it was. So let's go ahead to our editor and see the font should be bigger now. Okay, great. Now we are going to see this. There's something called a mini map here. So
ミニマップ
it is kind of useless for us because we're not
あ
programming and it's kind of taking up space. So I want to turn it off. Would you know how to search for that and turn it off? So go ahead, pause the video and see if you can figure that out. And if you can't or if you're done, just hit play again and we'll go over it. Welcome back. I hope you found it. It's on the text editor, but right there, mini map. But if you don't know where it is or you don't want to bother to search for it, just type mini map in the search bar up here. You can see that's the first option that's pop up. So control whether the mini maps is shown. If we check it off and you go back to your editor window, it's gone. So this is how you set the all the built-in and the settings for the extensions. We'll later on cover extensions. And one last thing is color theme. So some people like it dark, some people like it a little lighter. So there's another menu down here. It's a gear. It's called Manage. These have some of the pretty common options here. So you can see that you can call up the settings here as well. So let's go to color theme right there. All right, so you can see you can change the color theme right here. Let's change it to quiet light. See what happens. Yeah, kind of bright. Now, if you want to just leave it that way, you can, or you can also search for any settings in the search bar in the settings. So right there is the color theme. But I found it easier to use this menu because you don't have to edit a file. So I am going to set mine back to default dark just because it's a little bit easier to show on this type of screen. Okay, so congratulations, you get started on configuring and customizing your Visual Studio Code. So in the next task, we're going to learn about something called IntelliSense and extensions. See you at the next task. Welcome back to task 2. At the last task, we started configuring some of the built-in settings for Visual Studio Code. So in this task, we're going to talk about IntelliSense and what extensions do to Visual Studio Code. So let's get started. Now let's close this setting windows for now, just so we don't get a lot of clutter on our screen. Now, as I said before, there's already some syntax coloring in these files. So this is called part of IntelliSense. IntelliSense helps you code, help you type, gives you a hint, and also
色
gives
分
you
けてくれる
a
って
lot
や
of
つだよな、選択
conveniences
肢
that
で。
just and also can catch your error early when you're doing coding. Now, you will notice sometimes when you mistype something, let's go to CSS, which is a style sheet. Now, let's say I mistype this. You'll see there's a squiggly line, and if you hover over it, it will say unknown property. And these are all IntelliSense. There are some built-in IntelliSense in Visual Studio Code for, again, CSS, HTML, JavaScript. Those are pretty basic. Now, not all languages are built in because Visual Studio Code is just a basic editor. So in this task, we're going to add some functions. I want you to go to this extensions on the activity bar and just expand this column a little bit so you can see better. Now, the extensions are third-party software provided by third party, sometimes by Microsoft itself, but most of them are provided by third party. You can see who provide them here. So we are going to install one right now because we're going to keep adding functionalities to Visual Studio Code so we can configure it according to our development need. So the one that I want you to search for up here in the search bar is HTML boiler. Now, there are tons of these extensions. You can go ahead and spend a whole day or whole week exploring what they do and install the one you want and make your life much easier as a developer. So click on that one. And on this side, you can see all the information, sometimes how to use it and how to
基本
install
的
it.
に、
To install it is
ほとんど
usually
ローカ
pretty
ルはでき
easy.
るんだけ
You
ど、
can just hit the install button right there. And it just usually doesn't take that long. And so as soon as everything stops flashing and it says uninstall and disable, that means it's installed. Now, there's another trick. You can see what is installed on your system. If you go back up here in the extension, there's a filter. You can say filter install. And you only have one so far, right? So let's get rid of this. Now let's go back to the Explorer and see what this does. Of course, you can read the documentation, but I'm going to tell you, and you'll find out how to use it down below. Just type this. Okay, so let's go ahead and try it. I am going to add a new file in this root subdirectory let's call it test.html. So we can test it out. So what HTML boiler does is this just gives you basically a template. And so we'll start typing
ボイラープレートがあ
HTML.
るとから、
You can see there's already kind of some hints here. If you just select the one on the bottom, so you don't have to type the whole
基
thing.
本に、
Now it just created this template for
あ、
you.
いや、ちょっと
So
懐かし
you
いという
can
いらねえ。
just add it in. Let's say title, my first HTML or something like that. So you can create a skeleton HTML page rather quickly. I love this because I hate to remember all this. I usually just copy it from another file until I find this extension. So this is a lifesaver. So by the way, you see these white dots up here. That means you have changes that are not saved. Now we are going to turn on another lifesaver settings called autosave. So let's go to, we'll use this one here. Let's go to our settings, and we're going to search for autosave. And it's right there. It's off right now. It's by default is off. So I'm going to set
5
it
分
to
後だと
after
かそういうや
delay,
つだよな。
which is, and then the delay was down here, 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second. Now, every second after I make changes, the changes are going to be saved automatically. You can see it already saved my changes. So if I type something else here, let me see if I just type something here, and you won't get that dot anymore because that change is automatically saved. So let's close this file. Let's close the setting. We are going to install another extension that if you do a lot of HTML development, it's going to help you quite a bit. So remember extensions, other than doing IntelliSense, it also can provide additional functionalities. So we are going to search for something called live server. So just type in live server. It looked like that with a couple of kind of like echoes going out.
この、あ、そっか。
Okay, so we'll go ahead and install this by pressing install and just wait for this flashing and all this is done. Depends on how busy this server is. Sometimes okay, so it's done. Now I'm going to close this because I'm just going to show you how it works. Again, it's showing something down here. If you see this, just go ahead and close that. Okay, so how does this work? So let's go back to Explorer. Remember, this is where all your files are shown. We're just going to leave the test HTML alone. I already have a file that's working. It's called index.html. So let's go ahead and down here on the status bar, remember the extension added some new functions down here. So we can just go ahead and press go live. And you see what happens. It opens up a new page on your default browser, a new tab, and it shows the work. Not only that, if you go back to here and make a change, so why don't we just go to instead of contact, why don't we just say how to get in touch with me or something like that. You can just make some changes to these tags. And now if you go back to the live server, it already made that change. You don't even have to reload it. So it's down below right there, how to get in touch with me, see? So this is why it's called a live server, and it's just a really, really big lifesaver. You don't have to keep reloading your page. And if you want to open another page, since you've already gone live, so you can press this again, because if you do it, you will just close that port. If you open another file, you can just right click and press open with live server, and it will load it on another page with that same port that is serving this project. Okay, great. Good job. So you've learned what extensions are and what is IntelliSense and how it helps you code. So at the next task, we are going to explore more about how extensions can help with other languages that are not built into Visual Studio Code. Now, however, there is an optional task after this, which is an assessment. It's kind of like a pop quiz. So if you want to participate, which I highly recommend, it will help you check to see if you remember everything you have learned so far on this project. So I will see you either at the optional assessment or at task 3.
No.
Welcome to this optional assessment task. So on your Chrome browser, on one of the tabs, you would notice that there's something called optional contents. This is a menu where you can access these contents. Now, most of the time, you won't have to use these, but in case you want to go look at what we had gone over, and you can use this menu. If you close this browser accidentally, you can just reopen it, and this menu will be loaded automatically. So let's go ahead and get started. After task 2, assessment. Now I am going to turn your side of the screen full screen, just so I can show you what I have in my presentation. So you won't have access to your screen, but you will not need to access anything. You can just watch and think and follow along. So we're going to start this slideshow. So we're going to do this in the format of a quiz. So let's go ahead and see what the first scenario is. Bob just downloaded Visual Studio Code and is configuring his development environment. He found the dark colors very difficult to use and wants to change it to a lighter color theme. Which of these is a way for Bob to find this setting? So think about what we have gone over, and then look at all these answers and see if you can figure out which one is the correct answer. So go ahead, pause the video, give it some thought, and when you select, after you make your selection, hit play again, and we will go over the results. Welcome back. How did you do? So let's see what the correct answer is. It is B. You can go to the preferences menu and then settings and then search for color theme. Remember, that's one of the things we did. So let's see why the other answers are not correct. Right click on the editor panel to get the context menu, then select color theme. So this option does not exist in the context menu. Go to the gear menu on the lower right and then select editor setting. Also, the gear menu is on the lower left, it's not on the lower right, and it does not have the editor settings option right there. D, go to the control panel of the host operating system and change the theme. This is incorrect because Visual Studio Code does not reference the theme settings from the host operating system. So the correct answer is B. Are you ready for another one? Let's go ahead and try another scenario. Where in the Visual Studio Code screen would you find the options for Explorer, version control, and extension options? What is that part of the screen called? Go ahead, pause the screen and see if you remember. And after you selected your answer, hit play again. Welcome back. Well, the answer is the activity bar. That's one of the first area that we have gone over. The activity bar is where you will find these options, and later on we will see. We have already used extensions. Later on, we'll see what the version control option does. And on the file menu is not correct because it's not on the file menu. File menu is related to opening a folder that like we just did, opening a new window. Status bar just tell you the status of what you are editing or what you're doing. So it doesn't really have any of these options on it. The sidebar also, well, the sidebar is it's shown depends on what you selected on the activity bar. So it really doesn't, it's really not the correct answer either. Well, since you're doing so well, let's try one more. Where are Visual Studio Code? What are Visual Studio Code extensions? So remember, we just installed a couple of them. So let's see if you remember what they are. So pause the video, select your answer, and then press play when you're ready. Welcome back. So I hope you did okay. So it is a third-party softwares that provide additional functionalities to Visual Studio Code. Remember, Visual Studio Code is a basic editor that relies heavily on extensions to get customized. Now, I say third party, but sometimes it is provided by Microsoft as well, but most of them are third party. No, so why is 8 not correct? File naming convention that adds VSC to the end of a file. Don't get that confused with file extension and an extension in Visual Studio Code. They have the same name, so it's very confusing. This answer is incorrect. B, it is the license file that must be extended periodically for VSC to continue to function. This is incorrect because Visual Studio Code is licensed under an MIT license and is free to use. It doesn't need to be renewed. Okay, so the last answer, periodic updates from Microsoft that extends the function of VSC. This is the software update. It's not extension, so it usually doesn't add new functions. So they're not the same thing. Remember, extensions are just basically like plugins that you can add to your Visual Studio Code and enhance your experience. So I hope you did okay in this quiz. If not, if you're not confident, you can always go back and look at the last two tasks and make sure you got everything right. So I will see you at task 3. Welcome back to task 3. So at the last task, we started delving into extensions and added a couple of functionalities for our editor and our IDE. So in this task, we are going to set up for JavaScript and also another example, Angular, which doesn't have built-in support in Visual Studio Code. So let's go ahead and get started. We're just going to close this file for now. We're also going to close this one. So we are going to find an extension that's called JavaScript. So remember, if you don't know how to write JavaScript code or it's not your language, don't worry. We're not going to go in too much into that here. So just search for JavaScript ES6 and then snippets, just like that. It should be the first one that shows up, and more extension shows up later after this is recorded. Okay, so you see JavaScript ES6 code snippets, and of course you can read what it does. If you want to pause the video and read it, that's fine. Let's just go ahead and install it by pressing install, and it doesn't take much time at all this time. So don't close this window because if you scroll back down, you will see what it does. It basically saves you time, kind of like a boilerplate of HTML. But now these arrow tab keys. So we're going to try out a couple of these. We're going to try out FIN. We're going to try out CLG and see what it does. So it's already installed. Remember, you can always verify by go to the filter and then do built-in. These are the actually not built-in, install. These are the install extensions. We have 3 so far. All right, so let's go back to Explorer. Go ahead and select the JS subdirectory. We're going to start one. We're going to start a new file. Let's just call it common.js. This project doesn't really need any JavaScript file, but we're just going to test it. So go ahead and go to that file, go to the editor. So remember fin tab. After you hit the tab key, it fills it in. So now you just have to fill in these items. You can even use the tab and shift tab to go back and forth in these placeholders, which is really great. Let's just call this let's say I have an array called my array, and I want to iterate every item in it. So again, you don't have to understand JavaScript. If you don't, that's fine. Don't worry about that. But this basically just saves you a lot of time. So inside this loop, I'm going to write something that we do all the time with JavaScript. It's the console log, CLG tab. There you go. And fills it in. I'm just going to fill out hello world. Now, of course, you can't run this by itself, so we're just going to leave it as it's right now. So I also want to talk something about debugging, which is something, of course, that everyone does if you write code. Now, again, Visual Studio Code already have some debug capability for some languages, but not a lot. So what we do is we usually set breakpoints. So if you move your cursor to the left margin of the screen, you see this red dot. So let's say if I want to stop here when the program is being debugged, I want the execution to stop here so I can inspect things. So this is how it's done. So when it's red, that means it's on. If you click it again, it will be gone. Now, we're not going to go into debugging in this project because I have another guided project about debugging. If you are interested, go ahead and please check it out. Okay, well, this is just for you to play with. Now, if you want to try more of those shortcuts and see how much fun it is to play with, you can pause the video and do that. When we're done, we're just going to close this java.js. We're going to close this panel about that extension. Now, let's go back to index.html. This is actually with AngularJS, which is a JavaScript and infused in it. So you see these double curly brackets. These are all AngularJS syntax, but it's not highlighted right now because there's no built-in Angular support for Visual Studio Code. So we're going to add that. And this is an example of if you ever work with a language that doesn't have built-in support, you are going to go to extension and find whatever support you need. It's usually coming in the form of an extension pack. So it is Angular. So I'm just going to type in Angular. And you'll see that's already a lot of suggestions. So all we need is language service. There's a lot of these. Install anything you need and read what it does. So Angular language service, basically, if you come down here, just basically could do all the syntax highlighting, and you can also go to definition in the code. Let's see if we can do that. So let's install this extension because otherwise we can't use it. All right. So once it's done. All right, it's done, and I'm going to go back to Explorer, going to my index.html. You can see these are now different colors because it knows those are AngularJS items. So this is an example of a language that has no built-in support in Visual Studio Code, and we install an extension or many extensions to get it to work with Visual Studio Code. So remember, Visual Studio Code is all about you customizing it according to your need because it is designed to be versatile. So let's check our extension one more time. We'll go to the filter and say install, and now we have 4 extensions.
We noticed that we were in the last 10 minutes. Yes, I am still here.
Extensions so far.
So,
the next task, we're going to show you how to set up version control with Visual Studio Code, which is pretty much guarantee you're going to use it if you ever become a programmer or already are a programmer. So I will see you at task 4. Welcome back to task 4. So in this task, we are going to set up version management with Visual Studio Code. Now, we're going to use a version control system.
おい。うん。あれ音出ない。あれもう一回。タスクさん。
already are a programmer. So I will see you at task 4.
ああ、ダメだ。何やってたんだろうね。で、タスク4。バージョンコントロール。
Welcome back to task 4. So in this task, we are going to set up version management with Visual Studio Code. Now, we're going to use a version control system called Git, G-I-T, which is one of the most popular version control mechanism being used worldwide right now. So this is just to give you a taste of how to do version control in Visual Studio Code. If you are not familiar with Git and you don't understand the concept, don't worry about it for this project, but I do have another guided project about, actually 2 guided projects about how to use Git on its own. So go ahead and check it out if you're interested. So let's get started. So we are going to go to the source control on our activity bar. So remember, we went over this, but we don't know what it does yet. Now, you'll notice there are 2 ways you can use this. You can either use a local Git repository, or you can use a GitHub, which is a website that, again, a lot of developers use to share code worldwide. So definitely check that out if you are going to do a lot of this type of work or are interested. So we're going to initialize the repository. This is where all the changes are tracked. So just go ahead and press initialize repository. Now you see all the files in your project, in our project. That's right now this has a lot of U next to it. That means it's untracked. You can select what file you want to track for changes, and usually we want all of them. So we are just going to hit the plus sign here. So they all change to A. That means they're going to be added to your
ああ、あと重たい
repository
からここに
to
出るって
change
こと
to
ね。
track the changes. So we're going to enter a message here to tag our version. So I'm just going to type initial commit. Usually that's the first one. So if you hit the check mark, usually it will commit, but because this is your first time using it in this computer, so we have to set up something called username and user email. Those are the 2 things that Git uses to track who is making what changes. So go ahead and press open Git log. Now don't worry about all this text. You're not going to have to worry too much about it. Just make this a little bigger. Go back to these 2 lines here. So let's go ahead and select that. We're going to execute these commands in our terminal. Go ahead and right click and then copy these lines. So go ahead and go to terminal. Terminal is a built-in function for Visual Studio Code, so you don't have to open another application to use a terminal or command line. So you can just paste those two lines, hit Control V, it will ask you to paste. The first one is fine because we don't need to use a real email address. The second one, we're just going to back a little bit and change it to your real name. Go ahead and type in whatever name you want, no one can see it. I'm going to change it to mine, Harrison Kong, and then I'm going to hit enter. Now it's done. We can close this. And now I'm just trying to go do this commit again. All right, this time we created our repository. Now, nothing seems to be happening because we need to install the support for Git. So let's go to our extension again. We're going to search for Git. We're going to search for something called the extension pack. An extension pack contains a lot of extensions. So if you select it, it will show you all these is going to get installed. So we're going to press install so we have Git support. Again, extension is just so central to Visual Studio Code. And once it's done installing, let's go back to our change panel. Now you notice there's an extra button right there. So, it opens up all these. We can just close them because it's just telling you what it has installed. Right now. So let's go back to our change panel. You'll notice there's an extra button here. It's the if you hover over it, it's Git View History. So let's press that and see what happens. You can see this is my initial commit, Harrison Kong. It's called a master branch by default. So also if you click on it, you'll see all kinds of statistics of what file has been changed and how much. So let's make a change and commit and do another commit and see what you see. So we're going to go to index.html. Why don't we change, let's see, line 35-ish, work samples. I'll just change it portfolio. Sounds better, right? All right, so it's been changed, and of course my should have reflected in my live server right there. It's that extension still working. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Now you'll notice that there's an M next to my file. That means it's been modified but not commit, and it's also changed its color. This is what that extension does. We're also going to delete this test HTML that we created earlier. Move to recycle bin, and even though it's gone right here, if you go to your change panel, it will show that, oh, hey, you deleted this file. We're going to mark it as deleted in the repository. So we are going to commit these changes. We modified index.html and we deleted test.html. So we're just going to hit the plus sign, or you can just hit the individual ones. But once you hit the one on the top, they're all going to be committed to the change. So it's staged, so it's ready to be committed. So we're just going to add a message up here: change work samples to portfolio, just so we know what that commit it's all about. Now, for some strange reasons, all these messages are supposed to be in present tense, even though it's obviously past tense because you have already done it. But that's just a convention. All right, I'm going to press the check mark so we can commit this change. Now, if you go back to your history, it doesn't show yet. You just have to press refresh. You can see that's my change right there. Again, if I press that, it will show me what's been changed, that's modified. Just this much of the code, not a lot, and this one's been deleted. So we're going to install one more extensions, and I really like this one. That's why I want to mention it. It's called Git Graph. Once you have that, press it. And you can see that there's a little animation here. So your Git graph can get really complicated. You can do branches, you can do merges of changes. So we're going to install this. It's kind of fancy, even though yours won't.
今は講義を見てます。これは、ビジュアルスタジオの設定ですね。
Once it's installed, go back to your change panel. Now there's an extra button here. It's the graph. So if you click on that, it'll show you your current project. So with that little subway map on that, it's not a lot yet. If you want to try to make more changes,
こっちのガイドのビデオの方で、HTML のウェブサイトを作っているところを見てるんですね。
You can click on the files and it'll show you what the changes are. Really neat, right? So you can see we change work samples to portfolio. All right, so let's close all this for get ready for the next task. And now you know how to do version control with Visual Studio Code. I guarantee you're going to run across that at some point in your career. There's another optional practice task after this. If you choose to participate, I will see you there. If not, I will see you at task 5.
次はこれを PHP につなげる。
ウェブ制作をするんですね。
基本的にはフロントエンドのエンジニアを目指してるんで、ある程度はできないといけないかなっていう感じですね。
Welcome to this optional practice task. So in this task, you are going to try something on your own to see if you can apply what you have learned so far in a real-world situation. So let's go ahead and go to our slideshow. after task 4 practice. So if you want to look at the instructions after when you're going to do this, you can use this. So I'm going to disable your side of the screen for just a second so I can have a full screen. All right, so here's the scenario. You are working on a project that involves some PHP script. Now, if you don't know what that is, don't worry. We're not going to go over that here. We just need to know how to install the support for it. However, your current VSC configuration does not know how to debug with these files. So remember,
You don't
debugging
know
is
how
setting
to debug in
breakpoints on the
PHP.
left margin of
Does
these
that
files.
breakpoints?
Configure your IDE so that you can set breakpoints in PHP script. So these are some hints. There's a PHP file in the subdirectory PHP for you to test this. You do not need to know how to program in PHP. Just try to set a breakpoint. Think about where you would go to install these new functionalities and what to look for, and go ahead, pause the video, try to solve the problem on your own, and when you're ready to move on, press play again. But before we go, let me re-enable your side of the screen, and also I want to show you where this file is, just in case. Go back to Visual Studio Code, Explorer, under PHP subfolder, there's a database.php. That's the file. You notice that you cannot set breakpoints on the left right now because there's no support for this right now. Now, you see this, just close that because I want you to do this on your own. So go ahead, pause the video and see if you can figure it out. And when you're ready to move on, or if you're stuck, just press play again.
ビデオで毎週 SQL が入ってる。
Welcome back. So I hope you did okay. So of course, you're going to go to the extension panel. You're going to look for PHP. See what comes up. All right. So the best thing sometimes is just install the extension pack. Although I'm sure you can just install debug. That would work too. So we're just going to install this extension pack. And still installing. Those usually takes longer because they're installing a lot of components. So let's go back to our file. And our PHP database.php. Now you notice that now you can set breakpoints because you've just installed the support for PHP in Visual Studio Code. Congratulations. Hope you got that right. Again, if not, you can always go back to the previous task and watch the videos again and try it again. So I will see you at task 5, which is the last task. See you there. Welcome back to last task 5. So in this task, we are going to talk about how to synchronize your settings. If you have more than one workstation, let's say you do work in the office and you want to continue your work at home. You want both of your Visual Studio Code to have the same settings or vice versa. How would you do that? And also how to stay up to date in a couple of other items. If you want to roll out your settings to multiple workstations, let's say you're setting up computers for a team, how would you do that? So let's get started. Now, to synchronize your settings, you can use this gear icon down here. Go to turn on settings sync. If it's turned on, it will say it's on, but right now, of course, it's not. So let's go ahead and click on that. I want you to please sign in to synchronize your data across devices. So these are the things that you are going to sync. You can select which one you want to sync, usually just one all. So let's sign in and turn on. It's going to ask you to choose one of these services. So you can either sign up with Microsoft, with an account, or if you have a GitHub account, again, I highly recommend you to get one because it's just a wonderful community of developers out there in the whole world that use GitHub, I myself included. So let's say you just go to GitHub and you go to that website and you can log in or create an account. We're not going to do that right now in this project. I just want to show you how to do that. So the next thing is to stay up to date. Now, this Visual Studio Code get updated all the time, and you want they fix a lot of bugs, and you do want to get the update. So in Windows, it's under the Help menu. It's check for updates, and also under the Gear menu, check for updates. So let's see. Of course, it's not going to be any on my side because I just created this desktop, and I just downloaded this version, so it's the latest. Now, by the time you run this, you take this course, there might be updates available. So go ahead and try to install it and see what happens. Most of the time, it's going to ask you to restart Visual Studio Code for those to take effect. So we're not going to do that right now because there's no update. You can pause the video and try it on your side if you have updates. So the last thing I want to talk about is if you want to set up, save your settings so you can roll it out to a lot of machines. So let's go to Chrome and then search for, this is called portable mode, PSC. And just press enter, portable mode in Visual Studio Code. This is from, I believe, from Microsoft. Okay, so let's click on that and see what happened. Yep, this is exactly the website that you need to read because, okay, so first of all, it depends on your operating system. It's slightly different. The instruction is slightly different. You also have to download it, download Visual Studio Code from this source to use these features. But if you are a support person and you are setting up a bunch of workstations, and this is where you would want to go. Well, this is the end of the project. So by now, I hope you have learned how to customize your Visual Studio Code, your IDE, your integrated development environments to your liking, according to what kind of work you do, what type of languages you write code in. It's just a wonderful, wonderful product, and it's extremely, extremely popular. So definitely play with that more, either on your own or in here on the virtual desktop. And I want to thank you for taking this project. I enjoy guiding you, and I hope to see you again in a future project. But before we go, there is another optional cumulative challenge after this. So if you are up to it, see if you can just integrate everything that you've learned in this project and apply it to solve a problem or in a real-world situation. So hopefully you will take it. If you do, I will see you there. Hello and welcome to this cumulative challenge at the end of our guided project to see if you can apply everything you've learned so far in a real-world situation. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn your side of the screen full time so you won't have control over it for just a minute or two. So I'm just going to show you the challenge. Here it is. Okay, so you are a web developer for Cafe Plus, a worldwide coffee distributor. You need to modify a feature of the website which involves changing a Java file. However, your current VSC configuration does not know much about Java. So these are your tasks. You're going to add the word protected in front of 2 lines. So again, you don't need to know how to program in Java. I really give you just follow this instruction and make some changes. Create a new version with Git. Check the Git history and or Git graph to make sure you have created a new commit version. Install the extension that allows you to debug Java. And I'm pretty sure you already know how to do this. Check to see that you can set a breakpoint on line 19. Just don't try to run the file because it will not execute. It's just a dummy file for you to play with. Now, there's some hints on the next slide. You do not need to know how to program in Java for this challenge. Just make sure you can debug by adding a breakpoint and modify the code as instructed on the previous page. The file you need is located in the Java subdirectory as coffee.java. So remember, you can open up this link on your Chrome browser if you want to keep looking at these instructions and hints. So I'm going to turn your side of the screen back on so you can go ahead and try this challenge. Go ahead, pause the video and try to solve this problem. And when you're ready to move on, press play again and we will go over the solution. Good luck. Welcome back. How did you do? So you should be able to figure out how to do all this by now. You should be an expert in customizing and configuring your IDE in Visual Studio Code. But let's go over the solution, just in case you didn't. So let me exit this presentation and go back to Visual Studio Code. Okay, so under the Java subdirectory, there's a coffee.java. So notice that we cannot set breakpoints on the other side. Now, you could have just take this hint here, because when you open it, you would have seen this, how do you want to install the recommended extension for Java. Let's see the recommendation. I'm pretty sure you would have just typed in Java here. Extension pack is great, but let's type in Java and see what we get. This is another way if you want to do it by yourself. Again, it shows up a lot of extensions. Java extension pack, why don't we just install that one, because we are going to use all those features. So installing, just let's wait for a couple seconds. Still waiting.
英語わかるの？
ある程度ってか、ちょっ
Okay, so it's
と、
finally done, and I'm going to go
読む
to
ぐらいならなんとか。
my editor by closing this. So coffee.java. So we're going to add 2 words here. So let's create that
ここ
commit.
がサンプルコピーですね。これで、まあ
Again,
今
if you
回は
know
こういう
Java,
プロジェ
don't
クト
worry
で
about
作る
that
だけ
link
な
because
ん
we're not
で、
trying to teach you how to program here. So okay, so now we have made a change to our file. You'll notice that there's an M next to it and it turns orange. That means you have a change that's not saved
じゃあ、
in your
ここ
repository.
に、
So we're going to commit that by going to the change. Actually, I think we are, no, let's go to that. It's just a little slow. All right, we're in source control right now, and it's showing that you have a change that's not committed. So we're going to hit the plus sign so we can stage this change for the commit. I'm going to just add a message here, change properties to protect it. So when I look at it later, I know what's happening in that revision. All right, so I'm going to check the check sign. It's already done. So let's go to history. Now I can see there's another commit, change properties to protect it, and it's done by me. And of course, if I want to look at a graph and be fancy, now there's another stop on our subway line. Okay, great. Now let's see if we can set this breakpoints, because you can see this is kind of actually, and it's showing that, yeah, this basically IntelliSense working, showing you that this syntax is wrong because you declare this function to not
That's
return anything.
original.
You're trying to return something, so that's working. We can also set a breakpoint on line 19 now because this is active because we have installed support for Java. So that's all I wanted to try, and basically this works with any languages that you're going to use that doesn't have built-in support in Visual Studio Code. I hope you figured it out. I hope you did okay. If not, please make sure to review any of the previous videos or tasks to solidify your knowledge. Congratulations, this is the end of the project, and thank you for taking this project, and I enjoyed guiding you, and I will see you soon in a future project.
キック見たらだけだったな。stay, install,結構時間かかる。ゲームし。そして、時計。もうページ離れると、テスト、アクセスがなかったらページがにする。このテスト、indicate which means Visual Studio Code. To change Visual Studio Code settings, where would you? ファイルメニュープレイだった気がするけど。実際にビジュアル、裏でコードとやって、ファイル設定編集ターミナルヘルプ設定管理はな。Windows のメッ設定、ヘルプ、プレファレンスって、ファイルだよね。ファイルユーザー設定。これか。In the settings screen, how do you know if a setting has been changed from its factory default? ファクトリーセット覚えてねえ、そんなの。ブルーボーダー、多分、ブルーパーティクルのレフト気がする。Manual is trying to debug PHP scripts, but he is not able to segments. What do you think is the most likely reason? これかなMari is the IT support specialist in this community. She needs to set up 10 workstations with spaces for Java implementation. Which of these option you have many time by going to ポータブルモード使いとこか。Which one of following sentence descripts of future intelligence? まあ、これだよね、センスは。Pete is editing some file in Boost and notes there are point dots next to their file name on the house. What does it? In order to basic database things across different workstation, features account to you need to have MS は GitHub と。Which of the following should you do in the makes you the best practice? Which of the following languages does not have native support in basic paper extension? AngularJS. When is the version code? It. 送信。80%。よっしゃー。一応間違えたか。今の講義で、トリセットこことタスク処理を間違えた。でもまあ、取ったからいいでしょう。あれラーベモンキーか。うーん。これは別にいいか。これはまあ適当にやるしかない。メッセージ。なんか違う気がする。まあ、もっとすぐにできるから、受講中のコースをもう一つ。次に終わるから、今みたいにやるだけで。イントロダクション、ウェイカのイントロダクションとギターバンドビザスタジオコード。Also, which should take approximately 2 hours to finish. まあ、ニューバー、メニューをするとは、クリエイトリポジ、GitHub で操作をして、リポジトリを作って、ライトコードに見立てたコードで、あと、コミット、プッシュコード GitHub。プロジェクト、テイクワンイントラクション、クリエイト GitHub プロフィール。これを待ってるから終了としてマーク。で、ガイドは今やったガイド付きプロジェクトを、これが開く。OK、OK と。 ここがやるんだけどダメか。すごいですよ。ライムっていうのを使うと、こういう Windows をそのまま使うことができる。
Welcome, learners, to Introduction to GitHub and Visual Studio Code. Today I will be your instructor, and by the end of this project, I would have introduced you to two useful software tools to becoming a developer, GitHub and Visual Studio Code. Throughout this project, you will follow alongside of me screen to screen to complete a variety of tasks. You will create and learn the value of GitHub profile. Your GitHub profile, you will provide hosting for software development and version control using Git. You will also learn how to link your GitHub profile to your Visual Studio Code. So this is Visual Studio Code, which is one of the softwares for which we'll be using today. This is GitHub Desktop, which allows you to connect your online GitHub profile to your Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code will act as your source code editor, for which we will link to your GitHub account that we will create in Task 1. Remember, Visual Studio Code and GitHub are a great way to hoist your projects when developing. Now let's proceed with Task 1. Now we are going to practice. Once you create a GitHub profile, you'll be able to continue to the next task. Once you have Google Chrome open, we're going to type in github.com and then go to the sign up section, which should appear directly on your home screen. You create a username.
GitHub で入ると、
since usernames can't contain certain aspects, my username is going to be Teacher Coursera. Then you're going to enter your email. Now that you have your email typed in, you're going to create a password.
サインアップはしない。やってるから、
and sign up. You're going to have to verify your account.
まあ、人間であることを証明して使ったやつだな。できないの？貼り付けないときついんだけどな。ダメだ。
Once you get to this step, it's going to say, welcome to GitHub. They're going to ask you, what kind of work do you mainly do? You can choose whichever icon you want. I'm going to choose teacher. How much programming experience do you have? I'm going to have...
ログインだけちゃんとやんないと。入らないか。じゃあ、ここは見るだけにして、続き。
Enter a moderate amount. Please answer according to what skill set best fits you. What do you plan to use GitHub for? Learn, host. I chose the top 3. Once again, please choose whatever fits you. And what languages am I interested in? CSS, HTML. Once you press enter, they're going to ask you to verify your email. So I'm going to resend my verification code. And I ask that you pause here and verify your email off screen. Once you verify your email, your GitHub account should look like this. Now that your GitHub account is all set up, let's take a tour. Welcome to your GitHub profile. On the left-hand side, you will see a white set of blocking. This area is where your repositories will populate. At the top, you have your navigation bar. In the beginning of your navigation bar, you have your search section. Your search section allows you to search other people's repositories or other people's projects. People do not always work from their own code. Sometimes they use templates of other people's projects to get things started, for which you can search directly here. The next button you see here is your pull request. It lets you tell others about the changes you have pushed to your GitHub repository. Once a pull request is sent, interested parties can review the set of changes, discuss potential modifications, and then push the following up commitments if necessary. The button after that is your issues button. You use your issues to track ideas, enhancements, tasks, or bugs for work done on GitHub. Following that is the Git Marketplace. It is a new way to discover and purchase tools that extend your workflow. Next, we have the Explore button. This repository houses all of the community's curated content for GitHub, topics, and collections. Then we have our notification button. Next, we have our plus sign. Our plus sign allows us to create new repositories, import repositories, new GIFs, new organizations, as well as new projects. Following that, we have our icon, which is your user. It allows you to see your profile, which looks like this. Your profile establishes a pattern of how many commitments you make per day. So today we have 1 contribution. It also will populate your repositories right here as you create them. Then you have your repositories, which is where all your different projects will go. You have your projects, which is collaborations you do with other people. They will generate there. Do you have your favorites? And other features such as upgrade, featured preview, help, and settings. Now that you have had your GitHub info session, you are clear to move on to task 3. GitHub will act as your online host and place to save your project and develop a collection for your portfolio and all your work in the near future. Great job on completing the first part of this project. In this task, we will learn about how to create a repository. Creating a repository should pop up as an option for what you would like to do first. But if this does not happen for you, there are 2 options to create a repository. Right here on your left-hand side, there is a green button that says Create Repository. And if you choose not to go with this green button, and like mentioned before, here's a plus sign that also allowed you to create a new repository. Once in the new repository window, you will start by naming your repository My New Repo. From there, you'll proceed to your description. It is optional, but it's always nice to have a description of what your project will entail. Connecting VS Code to GitHub. That's a good description for starters. We're going to make this repository public so that potential employers and contributing developers may see your work. I recommend that you initial your file with a README for best practices. This is where all the description as well as the preview and the demo will go for people who are viewing all your work. Now, click Create Repository. This is where your README will populate in your repository. Having a README is important when making a project because a description of what your project is about will go here. This will be the first thing people see when you click on a person's project before actually looking into the folders. This entire area here is called your repository. Repositories are large folders on your GitHub profile that host smaller folders that contain code. The smaller folders that contain code will populate in this area right here. Seeing how you have no code at the moment, the only thing that's populating is your README. If you proceed over here, we have the code button. This button is very important. When you click on it, it gives you options to open in GitHub desktop, which is what is on our desktop right now, or download a zip. When you download a zip, it's like saving a file to your computer. By saving this file, you are allowed to open your code to Visual Studio Code, but you have to go through your terminal of Git Bash. GitHub Desktop allows you to easily transfer your code from your GitHub webpage to your Visual Studio Code. Next to it, you have Add Files. Add Files allows you to upload new files or create a new file. Remember, I mentioned to you that you don't have to always code from your own initial project. You can upload templates in different files to empty repositories. Files cannot be uploaded unless your repository is empty. Next to this, you have the Go to Files button. When you click Go to Files, it'll allow you to go to an area where your different files generated through your code will populate. Let's take a step back. Next, you have the main. So you can code from different branches. Since you aren't contributing with anybody, you'll be on the main branch, which is your initial branch. Up here, you have the code button, which allows you to be where your repository is. Next, you have the issues button. You have no issues at the moment because you haven't started coding yet, but typically this is where any bugs will populate. Pull request button, which will come from different contributors on your project, asking you to approve work or you to approve their work. You have no pull requests at the moment. You also have actions, Actions is where GitHub calls things to your attention.
GitHub あんま使ってな
You
い
have
な。
projects, which is things you work on with multiple developers. You have wiki. You also have security, which is your settings for your project. And you also have insights. So let's go back to our code. I just want to bring something else to your attention before we continue. We just made our first repository. We're going to go to our profile. As mentioned before, when you create a repository, your comments get populated here. So far, you have 3 contributions as of today, which essentially shows your history. And then if you scroll down, it says that you created your first repository and you created 1 comment to this repository so far. And now this repo has generated into your popular repository section.
クローニングリポジトリ GitHub デスクトップ。今のは GitHub 上だったから。
Welcome to task 4. In this task, we will pick up from where we left off, and we will clone the repository to our desktop. This allows you to host your work locally. To host our work locally, we're going to use GitHub Desktop. To do that, we're going to minimize our browser and locate our GitHub Desktop icon on our desktop. Then we'll proceed to double-click GitHub Desktop. GitHub Desktop is a fast, easy way to contribute to projects from your desktop. GitHub Desktop is designed to simplify all processes that the window flow in your GitHub, and it acts as a great way to connect to your Visual Studio Code as well. Once you have your GitHub Desktop icon open, we're going to sign in to our GitHub. You start by typing in your username. Then you proceed to type in your password. After that, you sign in. You should see your configure Git pop up with your name as well as your email as it relates to your GitHub account, and you're going to press continue. Make GitHub Desktop. Now finish. And this is what the GitHub Desktop looks like. In order to connect our repository to our GitHub Desktop, we are going to click right here to clone repository. There's another method in which to clone your repository as well, which you can do directly from the web browser. You go to Code, open in GitHub Desktop. Which will ask you to download GitHub Desktop, but since you already have it on your computer, you don't need to download it. We're going to minimize that. Click the repository for which you want to clone and proceed to clone our new repo. This box will pop up to make sure you're sure you want to clone, and you're going to press clone again. Welcome to your GitHub Desktop. Let's take a tour. In our GitHub Desktop, we have a navigation bar that consists of File. File is a location where you can create a new repository or clone a previous repository, which is linked to your GitHub account. Next, we have Edit. Edit is a location for which you can undo and redo items, as well as cut, copy, and paste, and select all, as well as find. Next to that, we have Views. View is a section where you can get the history of all your changes, as well as your repository list and your branch list. Next, you have Repository. This allows you to push and pull, which is a method for gathering all the information that's on your GitHub and pushing all the information from your Visual Studio Code back up to your GitHub. Next, you have Branch. You can start multiple different branches within a singular project, and Branch is the tab that allows you to maneuver through that. Last but not least, you have Help, which allows you to report an issue and fix any bugs that you may have. To the left over here is where your changes and the history of your changes will populate. As you are making changes to your code on your Visual Studio, those changes will populate in this section right here. You have the option to save your work directly within your GitHub desktop by writing a summary and a description of what you did and then committing it to your main, which is your GitHub host online. Or you have the option of saving it within your terminal directly on your Visual Studio Code. This section over here, which is the center section, is where your current repository for what you're working on will be held. You can use this button, which is the view on GitHub, to see your repository on your github.com. So it brings you here. Or you can show it in your Explorer, which shows you what your project looks like in your folders on your computer. Now that you've had a tour of your GitHub desktop, I would like for you to keep in mind that GitHub desktop is used as a buffer to connect your GitHub profile to your Visual Studio Code. Your GitHub profile acts as your online host for your code, whereas your Visual Studio Code acts as your local host, which is directly on your desktop. I want you to think of your GitHub desktop as the middle buffer that connects these two items together. Great job on the last task. In this task, we will be cloning our project into our Visual Studio Code. By the end of this task, you would have learned how to clone a repository into your Visual Studio Code, as well as what the different sections of Visual Studio Code are. Now that you have successfully cloned your repository into your desktop, you will proceed by clicking the Open in Visual Studio Code button. Your repository will open in Visual Studio Code. Now that we're in Visual Studio Code, let's take a quick tour. This main section here is called your editor. And you can open as many editors as you want by clicking the Split Editor button. This is useful when coding CSS as well as HTML. This side area here is called your sidebar. Your sidebar contains different views to assist you while working on your project, like your Explorer. This lower area of your editor is called your status bar. This gives you information about what you are working on, such as your project, the last time it was synchronized, whether or not there are any problems going on, which you have 0 because you don't have any code. Then you have next to your sidebar these 5 icons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They contain different views to assist you while working. This section is called your activity bar. The activity bar includes, but are not limited to, your file explorer, your search across, your source management, launching and debugging, as well as extensions. The activity bar lets you switch between views and gives you additional context indicators like the number of outgoing changes Git is enabled. I specifically care for the extension section because it allows you to search up different extensions to make your coding process easier as well as more intuitive. In the top area, you have the navigation bar. Underneath File, you can open new repositories and load new folders onto your editor. In the Edit section, you can undo and redo as well as copy and paste and replace different things within your code. In the Selection section, you have Extended Selection, you have Copy a Line, you have Add a Cursor Above, things that help you when coding your project. In the View section, you have your command palette. You also have your appearance, how you want your editor to look, how do you want your editor layout to be. You can also debug your console. I like toggle word wrap. It allows for wording to wrap around and so that it doesn't go off screen when you're working. Then you have the Go section, which allows you to switch between your editors. Like I told you before, you can have as many editors open as you want. You have the Run section. Run section is very important for when you're debugging your project. You have your terminal. Your terminal opens a section here at the bottom of your editor that creates different panels. Right now you're in your PowerShell panel. I mainly work inside my Git Bash panel because it allows for easier saving. And then all you need to do to get your Git Bash panel is click plus sign. You can split between these two screens as well. You don't have to have a bash and bash. You can have a bash and PowerShell. There's different ways to go about it. Last but not least, you have the help section on your terminal, and this gives you notes about how to use Visual Studio Code, notes about licensing, as well as tips and tricks on different ways you can best utilize your Visual Studio Code. Just a quick recap. To clone your repository, you open your GitHub desktop. Once your GitHub desktop is open, you have the option to clone repository. Once you clone your repository, you click Open in Visual Studio. Once you have your repository open in Visual Studio Code, you can proceed to your coding. You've gathered an understanding of what Visual Studio Code is and how the different buttons and sections work, and now you're ready to begin your coding process. Great job in task 5. Welcome to task 6, coding in Visual Studio Code and saving to GitHub. By the end of this task, you will be able to write code in Visual Studio, as well as add, commit, and push the code you wrote from Visual Studio to GitHub. We are going to write some code, and we're going to save our code to GitHub through the actions of adding, commenting, and pushing. To begin, we're going to put our cursor in our sidebar section, and we're going to hover over the no files. We're going to click that, and we're going to type in index.html to create an HTML document. As you can see, index.html has popped up in our editor. Now we can click directly in our editor and begin to type in some code. You don't need to know code to do this project. So the HTML that we're about to use is a simple doc script for essentially establishing words on a web page. We're going to start with a doc type script. So when you press shift for this symbol, doc type should populate and you can just click on it. After you get your doc type HTML, you press enter, you copy the same symbol again, and you type in HT, HTML will pop up, press enter. Then you close it with the opposite facing symbol. Then a closing tag will populate. Press enter. Inside of your HTML, you're going to start by starting with the same symbol once again, but now we're going to choose body. Press enter, close your body tag, press enter again. Following the word body, we're going to start with a H1. H1 is a tag for heading 1. Close your tag, an end tag will populate. Inside of your heading 1, you will type in my first project. Next to the closing H1 tag, you're going to put in parentheses this is my header. and you're going to press enter again to drop your cursor down. And you're going to create a P tag. A P tag is for paragraphs. Follow the same protocol for creating a P tag. You're going to type in my first paragraph. Outside of the closing P tag, you're going to put in parentheses again. This is my paragraph. Enter. Now that we have some code established in our index.html, we're going to go to our activity bar, to our extension section. In the extension section, we're going to type in live server and launch development. So this is a live server that should pop up, and we're going to install this. Remember, I mentioned that you can install different properties to make your coding process more intuitive and interactive. So we're going to use our live server to view our code online. You start by right-clicking your cursor over your editor and click Open in Live Server. Now you can see my first project, and this is my header populates under my first project. In my first paragraph, this is my paragraph populates underneath my first paragraph. We're going to minimize this as well as minimize this and minimize this. Just some friendly reminders, we do have GitHub Desktop and Visual Studio Code directly on our desktop. Now we're going to return to our Visual Studio Code and our GitHub Desktop. Before we save our content directly in our Visual Studio Code, I wanted to show you where our source control recognizes that we made changes to our index.html, but that also populates here on our GitHub Desktop as well. So you have the option to save your work in your GitHub Desktop right here, or save your work in your Visual Studio Code. I'll show you both methods. To do it in your Visual Studio Code, we're going to go to our terminal, and we're going to go to our bash section of our terminal. We're going to type in git add, period. And we're going to type in git commit -m quotation marks index. That saves our changes, and then we type in git push. A login to GitHub will pop up. So you just proceed to log yourself in. I'm going to do that off camera. Once you log in, all your work will be pushed to your GitHub. And if you go back to your GitHub desktop, as you can see, there's no longer any more changes to be pushed. From here, we're going to go view on our GitHub website. And if you look down, you can see all the changes you've made have been populated into your repository. You can check more by clicking into your index.html, and you'll find the code that you created. So remember, to save your work from your Visual Studio Code to your GitHub profile, all you need to do is git add, git commit, and git push. Thank you for joining me for this guided project. I hope you learned how to maneuver through GitHub as well as Visual Studio Code as a new developer.
これでいいのかな ?OK, yes. グレーデッドクイズ。まあ、今ので点数。What did GitHub? I wish the net that collaborate with domain hosting of help create sites for small business. 違うこれでデベロップメント。多分ソースコードのウェブサイト。 で、これにダメヒトリーズ。ダウンロード、ローカルにリモートのコピーを作るんだよね。だったら、ディファレントセクエンス、オブジェサイズコード。How do you save work from Visual Studio Code to? これだっけ。あれ、手塚リポーションとリードミーが選択するね。ああ、リポジトリネームってあれつけようってことね。もう一度試す。もう一度試す。これはネームと、プリカプライベート。あとはこれにメイトする。ベトロコピーします。ディファレントセクション。こうか。あと、ギットこのような。送信。間違えた。ここで見なきゃいけなかったか。まあいい。OK。GitHub。次の項目に進んで、はい。OK。パワードパー。終了としてマーク。いるのかな。関係ない。これで2つ終わったから、今回はここまでです。とりあえず講義が終わったっていう感じですね。試しにガイドプロジェクトってのがあったのでやってみたんですけど、普通に講義をやった方がかえって楽の方な気がします。では、お風呂やんなきゃいけないので。
ディスコンネクト。
よいしょ。